What's up, people? What's up, G babies? What's up, little programmer babies? What's up, all my 90s babies? How are you all today? This morning it is cold in South Louisiana. It is fucking freezing. Freezing. Actually, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't that, like, it's cold, but it wasn't windy. Usually, whenever it's cold, it's also really windy. You know what I mean? But it actually wasn't windy. So, like, it just wasn't as terrible as it usually is. In Louisiana, it doesn't get really cold often, but when it does, it's usually cold and windy and like humid. So it's just like, God, it's so terrible. But today, when I got off of work, which was like at 8:45 ish, something like that, um, it wasn't even. It was like 30 degrees. I didn't even think it was 32 degrees because when I walked outside of my job, I was like, no, it's not even that bad. Like it's cold, but it's not like sun was out, wasn't windy. It didn't feel deadly. And then I got in my car and I saw the temperature said 32. I'm like, damn. So it's still like freezing technically, but I just didn't feel it. It felt more like what 40 normally feels like because of the lack of wind and all that. But so stay safe. It's gonna be icy out there, baby. Probably. Yeah, I think one of these days it's supposed to rain, but be safe. Be careful. Don't wanna. I saw a video of like a pile up black ice, and God, it was terrible. Anyway, all right, so let's jump in where we left off yesterday. Yeah, so we're back at it 2 days in a row. I'm on a streak here. I'm trying to keep my streak up. My streak keeps getting broken. It's that time of the year, the new year. Everything's kind of bumpy at that time of the year. You go through transitions and new things start, old things end. Blah 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 blah. Got a lot going on. So I'm trying to get back into the rhythm, the straight drive to the end of this project. No more detours, etc. Hopefully. Anyway, so 9:42 start time. What did we do yesterday? We figured out how to debug, understand it. Okay, Git on a deeper level, which we did learn a lot more about Git. Which was cool. I mean, it's like you need to know Git, right? If you're gonna program professionally, you need Git. It's just one of those things that you can't go without. You need it. Um, So I haven't really taken a course on Git. I just kind of like learn as I go. I find that's um, when I learn best is when I'm just like in the moment, like I encounter a problem and then the problem solution requires me to learn something new. I have, I don't know, ADD, ADHD, whatever, something, you call it laziness, whatever. I'm just like not good at convincing myself to learn a topic and just go all the way through and, like buy a textbook on such and such topic and just like do the entire textbook. That becomes really boring to me very quickly. I much prefer learn a topic, learning as I go, sort of thing. I let the problem present the solution, and then I go through solving the problem. That makes sense. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna pull up my good friend. Well, we'll do Claude today. Claude's supposed to be better, unless maybe ChatGPT came out with a newer model. Maybe now it's better. I don't really keep track of the newest models. They're usually all generally sufficient for the types of problems or the way that I use them. They're pretty good in general, but I know Claude is maybe a little better. Anyway, alright, so Um, we successfully debugged that Git bug. We tested the game via a game test, and everything was working as expected, which is obviously good news. Stage committee push changes. Okay, so now our Git hub repository is up to date with all of our current changes on the secondary branch, and secondary is really like our main branch. Master is basically should just be called stable. It's like the branch that I only like push to master, or rather pull from secondary. I don't know the correct terminology here. I should know that, but I don't. Um, Basically, I only make master like secondary whenever secondary has become very like a big checkpoint. That's whenever I will copy my secondary branch over to master and make it, master identical to secondary branch, and then I go right back to the secondary branch and continue making all of my changes. So the names of my branches are not very fitting, honestly, but it's really not a huge deal. Alright, so what is our next thing to focus on? Okay, let's look at our things to do. Okay, first of all, let me get this little thing running. So it's highlighted my cursor. Now we have to restart our Python extension. So apparently they have updated it. Python extension for Visual Studio Code. Like, what is is this like features changelog? Changelog? Okay, so that's a pretty old. Is it from oldest to newest? That's April. No, it's. So why does this need to be restarted if it's not like a new update? I don't know. I don't really know exactly why that is. Switch to release version. This was for 21 days to release version. Okay. I don't know. Whatever. It's not a big deal. Looks like we don't have any more notifications, so we don't need to update or restart else extensions. Okay, so we have a general reminder. Figure out a way to remember assign the last remote master commit as the last stable. Figure out a way to remember assign the last remote master commit as the last stable state of game prior to timestamp data transfer implementation. Okay, that is old and not relevant anymore. Remember note. Silly phrase. Remember note. Global counters. Remember to import the counters using the global keyword. Yeah, we are like. Remember note. Int immutable arg modification. If you pass int immutable object to a function as an arg and then modify the arg, you aren't modifying the original. You are simply creating a new reference to the same value. Yeah, like right. Okay. That was kind of worded funny at the end, but I know what I meant there. I know what I was getting at. I had problems understanding previously. I misunderstood how that worked in Python. Consider deadlocks as issues when encountering script hangs. Okay, I'll leave that. Fair enough, because that is something I need to remember. Consider using sleep instead of universal delay. Yeah, we don't know. Just no. Greatly confused. I was greatly confused. At end of session, always stage from root project directory commit and push to correct repo. Yeah, baby, that's good news. That's a good reminder. Always copy back up the entire project on the local machine at the end of each coding session. Ooh. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so current issues. Git add bug. We fixed that, so we're done with this. Get it out of here. Next thing is going to be client py reconnect restructure. Restructure the overall logic of client pi to accommodate the reconnect system. Okay, so this is where it gets gritty, dog. It's about to get gritty, dog. Y'all know how to do the gritty? It's about to get real gritty, dog. Should I open up client side by side? No, I don't really need to do that. I pasted in client into client refactor. So client refactor is client pi, just with modifications that I've made thus far, implementing the reconnect restructure. So we had previously considered a system that was just going to use basically if statements or if condition check to determine where we would re-enter the game after a disconnect, built within the already existing code, the main while loop, whatever you want to call it. But that actually won't work because it requires entering certain clauses that would require the reconnect number being different. Like, and then it would execute code. You know what I mean? So like, we had checkpoints at various places, and the indentation levels varied with those different checkpoint numbers, and that just won't work because, as cool as it sounds and simple, it just won't work like that. Because if checkpoint 5 is the, I guess we call it the highest indent level that you need to start on to enter into the deeper lower indent levels where your actual checkpoint integer broke off at, you're not going to enter into that. And then if you did modify it in such a way that it would enter into that section and just kind of work its way to the actual checkpoint you want to start at, well, it would still like run that code, right? It would still run those, whatever is in that checkpoint's code is going to be rerun, and you're like probably not gonna want that to happen. You're expecting to pick up where you left off, not like 3 checkpoints back. So it's just not realistic. I just wasn't thinking clearly when it's because I used this example, but this example presupposed that we would all be working from the same indent level. So we had to reformulate, we had to go back to the drawing board and reformulate a new solution to this problem. And we have 2 options. Option 1 is called the game state system. And this is where we have various functions which restore the game to the proper state depending on game state whenever DC occurred. So you would have, you know, basically instead of checkpoints, instead of having a checkpoint system and re-entering based on the checkpoint num, and just literally running the direct code based on the associated checkpoint num, like basically how where'd I have it written out? Right over here. So it would just be like this. We have our if name is equal to main. So whenever they get disconnected, let's say they were right here at checkpoint 1. So checkpoint int would equal 1. Whenever they reconnect and they rerun the client script, it's going to go here, say if name is equal to main. It's going to go here, while true, and in this while loop, it's going to bring up the menu screen where they can choose to reconnect to the game that they were previously playing. And then we're going to check to see, are you reconnecting or not? If we determine that we are reconnecting, how do we determine that? Well, I mean, we could just have a reconnect boolean, honestly. Like, we could have a well, we can figure that out. I thought I did have that figured out. About how to determine if it's a reconnect. Have this. Done. Okay, grab unique save file client ID. If it's equal to none, then it's not a reconnect. So basically, we were gonna use the unique save file client ID that gets saved to our save file as a indicator, basically acting as a boolean switch, so that if it's equal to none, then we know it's not a reconnect because the game hadn't started yet. But if it's 1 or 2, then it is a reconnect, and that is their associated ID. So it has a double function of being an ID, but also it functions as a boolean as well, to determine whether it is a reconnect. I mean, we could just have reconnect boolean that gets saved to the save file. That would probably be clean, you know. We don't have to be that petty performance to you know, save that much. I think we could just create a reconnect boolean. Yeah, I would rather use an actual just grab unique save file. I mean, we would still need the ID, but if reconnect is equal to false, the person can not reconnect. Don't need to reassign the ID since we would already have it via the save file. Don't need to assign the ID since we already have it. Well, that doesn't make sense because we wouldn't have the ID because it wouldn't be in the save file because it wouldn't be a reconnect. So that actually is wrong, I think. So have grab unique save file client ID, which is correct. We do need that. So we need this, say if save files, call this reconnect bool is equal to true, And so how do we determine though if we're connecting to a new game or if we're connecting to like if we're reconnecting? Because all this is doing is running the connect. It's establishing a connection. I mean, we could get the... So there's a few different ways we could do this. We could have like a game ID that would be associated with each game. That would be sent from the server. That would basically be stored on the server whenever it gets started. We would make game ID be, you know, for some 5, 6, 7, 8 digit number that would be randomly generated. And or it could be like on a counter, you know, and it would just go up every time a new game is started, starting at 0, and then it just would go up 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And then so like we would have the server's game ID, and then we would use the server's, we would send that game ID over to the client after they connect to say, hey, this is your game number. And then if the save file's saved game number on the client side matches the game number ID that was sent by the server, we would know it's a reconnect because, you know, that ID matches matches on the server side. So then, yeah, it gets sent over to the client receives it, and the client's like, okay, game number 1, and then, well, it's like, wait, well, we already have game ID number 1 saved to our save file, which means we were already playing game number 1 last time I was logged on. Yeah. So then that would be the indicator. If the two IDs matched each other, that it would be a reconnect. So and then in that case, we would say, hey, we know it's a reconnect. Receive. So this is going to get nixed right here. But we do need to grab the unique save file client ID. So yeah, I think instead of the unique save file client ID, we would need if save files reconnectable is equal to true. So yeah, instead of doing that even, because ultimately we have to know whether or not, like, to know whether or not we're reconnecting, we have to know if it's the same game, like it's the same player that it was playing against, and all the other data is the same. And an easy way to do that would just be to use a game ID. So that to me seems like an easy solution. So we would just use a game ID. So we're gonna nix this. Let's say connect, and then have server send the game ID, one ID for each started game. Associated with the connection or whatever, I guess. And then save the game ID to a save file on client side, and then we would well, yeah, first we would check on CS to see if saved game ID matches sent game. And that's if a match, then it's a reconnect. If not a match, we know it's a new game. Okay, then we save the game ID to the save file in CS. Save file false value would be none. It's game ID. Initial value, whatever initial default. If the saved game is equal to, that's also an indicator. Save the game ID to save file on CS. All right, that's very straightforward. So game ID, how would that? So it's a game ID created on server side, right? It's created on the server side, and what else? You could basically have it start it as let it have an initial value of 0 and increments by +1 every time game starts. I mean, I feel like that should work, right? I mean, ultimately, yeah, as long as each game has its own ID, that's all that really matters. Yeah, so we could figure out, you know, the nonsense of that in due time. Alright, so we have game ID created on check saves. Because we couldn't check to see if it was the same IP address of the other player, because this could be a new game but have the same other player. You know, you might be going up against the other guy again in a different game. But we couldn't just use the connection or whatever, like, couldn't just check the opponent's IP address and be like, oh, well, we were going against him, so this must be the same game. Well, no, it's a different game against the same person. So having an explicit game ID, I think, would be ideal. So let's go ahead and add that to the add that to the file, which is called currently the CS save file pickle. So we have the client side client save file. Then we have type unique save file client ID, store the unique ID of the client for PC connects. Okay. Then we have this checkpoint ID. We might not use that. So we have a new data structure here, which is going to be created on 7. And this is going to be the game ID. And it's going to initially equal none. So it's int purpose store the unique ID of the previously currently connected game, or the unique ID of the previously / currently connected game for DC and reconnects. This ID is assigned server side and sent over the network at the start of the game when CS connects to the server side. Used to determine if reconnecting to previously started game. Upon reconnect, server sends game ID, then checks this file's value to see if it matches. Now, game ID is none. Initially set to none. I don't know what I did there. To determine if this is to signify that no game has been started for this client yet. So if this val is equal to none, it's so it sort of acts like a boolean. So the type will actually be none/int, and same thing with this. It would be none/int. Say initially, basically just copy the same one. Initially set to. It's set to none to signify that no game error that no ID has been or just has been. So no ID has been assigned for this client yet. Why do I feel like that's not right? Initially set to none to signify that no ID has been assigned to this client yet. That's right. So if this val is equal to none, we know it is not we know. Well, yeah, that would still. We're not going to use it for that purpose, though. Unique other time. To determine specifically to determine whether this client, current client, was number 1 or number 2 for proper data structure assignments. Etc. That, etc. Okay. We actually might not use this. this to contemplating. Final system. Yeah, yay. Update there. Learn more about JSON, determine if any dictionary or something to convert saved data into plain English. If we need a dictionary or something to convert saved data into plain English or readable Python. Okay. Why am I so tired? Why is this always a problem for me? Okay, so we have so overall we have two systems that we are going to use, right? We have the checkpoint system, or we have the game state system. And the checkpoint system is basically this right here, where we have while true. So I got just a little bit sidetracked, but that's like part of what needed to happen. Really aside, it was a necessary sidetrack. So then we have if name is equal to main. Let's say they reconnect. Now they're running the client script. It's gonna go in this order. If name is equal to main, enter into it. While true, enter into it. It's not gonna have pass. It's gonna be menu screen. Enter into it. So we're gonna run this menu screen. They're gonna choose to either reconnect to a basically start a game, or and maybe we could make that an option if they okay, so this is the refactored structure. I see. So maybe we could do, well, we wanted to do connect after the menu screen. So I was gonna say we could highlight on the menu screen either like disable or enable the reconnect to previous game option if they are connected and it is determined that they were connected to a game. Just thinking, so there's a bunch of like different ways that all this can happen, and I like the idea of the game ID thing. So like that's a pretty good idea, I think. Having the server determine whenever a new game is started, you assign that game ID and then send it to each client, and then they save that ID to their save file. So basically, once they get that save ID and until they finish that game, that game ID, rather not save ID, the game ID is going to be saved in that save file for each client, so that whenever they reconnect, well, see, this raises the question as well of, so scale. We only have it to where Like there is only one game that you can be connected to. There isn't a pool of games to choose from. That's just not the way that the game is structured right now. It's just not set up to scale to handle more than just one player going against one player. All Connect does is it uses the socket to connect that address. So now we have a connection at this socket. So the network socket is socket.socket, okay? And then the server is this basically, I think, would be whatever our IP address is, like whatever the local machine's IP address is I think that's right. The fuck am I hearing? Oh, that's the garbage truck. I'm like, dude, what am I hearing right now? What am I doing here? Okay, so yeah, we want to check this to make sure. Let's paste this in. Say, does this code essentially get the local machine's IP address? Is that right? Not exactly. This code gets the IP address associated with the machine's fully qualified domain name, but it may not always return what you're looking for. Let me explain and show you some better alternatives. Ooh. The code you mentioned has some limitations. It relies on DNS resolution, which might not be properly configured. It might return the loopback address. If your machine has multiple network interfaces, it might not return the one you want. Here are better approaches. Using a dummy connection, a known external server, like Google's DNS. Using a dummy connection. Using the Netafaces library requires installation, but most reliable. Or using host name methods, what you suggested, least reliable. The code artifact I provided shows all these methods implemented. The dummy connection method is generally the most reliable built-in approach without requiring additional libraries. You can use it like this. S equals socket if inet socket dgram. I don't think I've ever usually used dgram before. S connect and then IP s.get sock name at index 0 because it's. Would you like? Yeah, I don't really. To get the local machine's IP address. So, fully qualified domain name, but it may not always return what you're looking for. Okay, so let's read this further. And Claude, the thing I don't like about Claude is the way that this is structured. Like, when you click on this, it should just fill up the whole screen. You know what I mean? Like this whole partially side-by-side thing. It should take over the whole screen. I don't know why it's like a half, whatever. Okay, so let's look at the different methods here. We have import socket, import Netafaces. I've never used that before. So get local IP methods. Different methods to get the local machine's IP address. Using a dummy connection, where we have def get IP via dummy connection. Try to create a dummy connection to get the default network interface. Okay, so we have s equals socket.socket af inet socket equals s connect 8888 port 80, and then IP equals s.get sock name at index 0. That's the one I don't understand. We have s close return IP except exception is EF return. So what is that? Okay, because you're using a host name is not always reliable. Get IP via host name. Code you mentioned socket get host by name. Socket get fqdn. But in this case, they use socket get host name. Socket get host name. And it says not always reliable. I don't know why that is, but it says it's not. And then method 3 using fqdn. What you asked about, not always reliable. Get IP via fqdn. Return socket get host by name. Okay. And then what's the difference between host name versus fqdn? And then we have, so this is the same thing except it just does get fqdn instead of get host name. And then we have method 4 using netafaces. It's the most reliable but requires installation of this library. Get IP via netafaces. Try get default interface, which is default gateway equals netafaces dot gateways at default at netafaces dot afinet at 1. Get addresses for that interface. Addresses equals netafaces dot if addresses at default gateway at netafaces turn addresses at 0. Ooh, that one, I mean, that's a lot. Like I don't I don't really know what's going on there. Explain netafaces option a bit more. I really don't want to learn all this stuff, you know, but it may be important. And then we have return dummy connection is get IP via dummy con host name fqdn and netafaces if netafaces in globals else netafaces not installed. Okay, there we go. So let's look at what it is going to tell us of. So let me address these questions. 1, s.getSocketName at 0 returns a tuple of host port. Returns a tuple of host and port. So this host address, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah, because 0 is the IP address, aka the host. So s.getSockName returns the host and port, or address slash port. And index 0 is the host slash address. Okay. The socket connection to 888 forces the system to pick the correct network interface. I don't. Why is that? Why does 88888 force the system to pick correct network? Okay, so we have hostname versus FQDN. Hostname is just the machine name, laptop, and then the FQDN is the full domain path, laptop.company.com. Includes hostname plus domain information. Okay. And then netface's approach gets the default gateway interface. For example, eth0 or wlan 0 default gateway equals netfaces.gateways at default at netfaces afinet at 1. I don't know what that means. Gets all addresses for that interface. Addresses equals netfaces.if addresses. Default gateway interfaces afinet. First address is typically the IPv4 address. For that interface. So we have get the default gateway interface, which is default gateway. And we use the default gateway to get all addresses for that interface. And what is a gateway? What is a gateway interface? I don't know what the gateway interface is. Okay, so then the first address is typically the IPv4 address. And then what is an IPv4 address? Well, I mean, there might be like MAC address and like all this other stuff. I'm guessing that it lists that sort of thing. I don't know. Or IPv6 or whatever the fuck, like just different ones. And she shows all network interfaces. Distinguish between IPv4, IPv6. Works reliably across platforms. Provides additional network info, netmask, broadcast. So S get sock name is just the address port, and doing sock name at index 0 is just the address. The socket. And then why do we choose port 80? Why do we choose port 80 there? Alright, so I asked a little bit more questions. I don't want to go too deep on this. This will be my last little set of questions. This will be enough. 8888 is Google's DNS. Is external, so your system must use its external network interface to reach it. Okay, that makes sense. Port 80 is just conventional. Any valid port would work. A gateway interface is the network interface. Like Wi-Fi or Ethernet. Connects to your default route to the internet. Think of it as your main door to the internet. The gateway interface is the network interface. Okay. IPv4 addresses are one type of internet address. IPv4 is 32-bit, 192.168.1.1. IPv6 is 128-bit. Okay. MAC is hardware address. Loopback, local testing. Gotcha. IPv4 is still most common, but IPv6 is going due to IPv4 address exhaustion. Ah, okay, cool. So what is it? Is this? Does this code essentially? Okay, that's the first thing I asked it. You mentioned has some limitation. It relies on DNS resolution, which might not be properly configured. What does that mean? You might be return the loopback address. You might return the one you want. Okay. Expand a bit more on that, please. Let me explain the limitations. DNS resolution. When using getters by name, your system needs proper DNS setup. I don't even know what DNS stands for. Domain name system. Domain name system returns domain names into IP addresses. Domain name system turns domain names into IP addresses, which browsers use to load internet pages. Every device connected to the internet has its own IP address, which is used by other devices to locate the device. So a DNS turns domain names into IP addresses. Okay. Got it. Got it. How DNS works. So computer browser requests to visit. Just want to see that little diagram if I could. Where's the little diagram at? Here it is. Computer browser requests to visit HTTPS. What is company or local DNS is checked, and the requested address is not found. ISP DNS is checked next, and is also unable to find the address. Root DNS is checked, and the address is found. IP address 206.19.49 is returned to the computer. Domain name system. So then the domain name system is checked and the IP address is found. IP address is returned to the computer. Computer receives IP address and prompts the browser to open the given addresses. To open the given address. To DNS is checked. Okay. Domain name is usually contained in a URL. A domain name is made of multiple parts called labels. Okay, gotcha. I don't want to go too far into that. DNS resolution. When using GitHub by name, your system needs proper domain name system set up to resolve host names to IPs. Without it, the function fails. Back. So potentially that could happen. Loopback 127.0.0.1. If hostname resolution isn't configured right, it defaults to loopback. An address that only connects to your own machine, not the network. Okay. Alright, so I understand. I'm seeing now. Multiple interface. Your machine might have Wi-Fi, Ethernet, VPN. Get host by name, picks one, but not necessarily the one you want to use for your specific purpose. That's why the dummy connection method is more reliable. It forces using the actual network interface rather than relying on DNS or hostname configuration. Right, because you're not using a DNS, you're using, because that DNS gets transferred to IP, you're just using IP, right? So 888.8 is Google's IP DNS. It's Google's public DNS server IP address. It provides DNS resolution services, converting domain names to IP addresses. Often uses a reliable external address since it's consistently available and well known. So it is Google's public DNS server IP address. So it's a little bit of a it's a bit confusing there. Got it. I think I understand. Okay. Now I know why that option is bad and why this option is better. That Claude presented, which is actually I think I'll do what Claude said and use the dummy connection. Okay, yeah, so I think this is, what is sock dgram? That's another thing I want to know. What is sock dgram opposed to other options? Let me copy this real quick. Copying off of Claude, man. Look at you. Can't even figure this shit out on your own. Hey, but for real though, AI is for like mid-level programmers like me. I would say I'm low/mid-level. Like I'm not a newbie, but I'm not like a professional. So I'm kind of like in the middle there. It's really great for people like me. I know it's not really great at like complex multiple system interaction solutions, but it is good at just like retrieving hidden information that you would normally have to do some searching for. It's basically like going to the library and like instead of having to walk around and find your way through and read different little snippets of books, it will do that for you like 1,000 times faster than what you could, and basically summarize and give you the information. And it's usually pretty accurate for the most part. Sometimes it gets confused, but for the most part it's pretty accurate. SockDgram is for UDP, User Datagram Protocol. Sockets. The main socket types are SockDgram, which is UDP. It's connectionless, no guarantee of delivery, faster with lower overhead, good for quick requests. And then a sock stream, which is what we normally would use. It's connection-based, guaranteed delivery, error checking, good for reliable data transfer. In the IP address example, we use UDP because we just need a quick way to determine the network interface. We're not actually sending data. Gotcha. Okay, cool. So we're gonna use this. Yeah, we're gonna use that method of. And I am. Ooh, I'm tired today, baby. I feel it deep in the eye sockets. You know when you're tired, you just feel it deep in your eyes. You got crust on the inside of your eye. Yeah. It's a very great feeling. It's like a struggle to be lucid and. So what was I doing? Okay, yeah. So we're gonna go over here and. Socket using network socket. We're just using socket ghettos by name, and we're passing in socket get fqdn. But what we could do is we create this dgram socket, we connect, and then we get the IP, and then we close. Always do this first. Well, should we just have it in its own little function? So, yeah, we'll assign it to, we'll say self.server. Basically, just copy this, and instead of it running that function, it's going to instead run the, we'll call it the, what is it, the dummy address. It has dummy connection. So it goes to use the dummy connection, which forces it to use our external interface, which will force it to use the correct IP, which is what we want. and sock name returns the sock name returns the address in the port, right? And then we get the address at index 0. I think. Alright, so what we'll do, get IP via dummy connection. And that's a good name. Get IP via dummy connection. So then we're going to create this new function, say def, and what it's going to do is it's going to return the local IP address. Alright, and it's going to run this code right here. I think. So right here. Yeah, so we have s equals socket.socket socket if i.socket.dgram, and then s.socket or s-connect 8888 at port 80, and then IP is equal to s get sock name. So what does get sock name? Get sock name does, we can just Google this. Get sock name stores the current name for the socket specified by the S parameter into the structure pointed to by the name parameter. It returns the address to the socket that has been bound. Retrieves the current name of a socket descriptor. Returns the local association for a socket. Socket is the socket descriptor, and then name the address of the buffer to copy the socket name into. The size of the name buffer in bytes, return value 0 if socket error. Returns 0 recurs. The sGetSocket name function is useful when a connect call is made without a proper If the socket is not bound to an address, the call will return with the family set and the rest of the structure set to 0. Okay. And then we close that socket. So this is actually going to be the local machine IP address. And then S close. Okay. This one instead. So I'm just gonna say replacing above section, above line. Okay, get rid of this. There we go. So now let's see if this works. Okay, so let's cd canasta main. Make sure our change isn't bug anything out. So we'll run server. Okay, there it goes. Paste this in. Let's run the client. Okay, there we go. Paste that in. Client again. Okay, there it goes. And it looks like it's working because it's connected already, so that means it's working. I mean, it's gotta work, right? Like if it didn't, what we can do is I will print it. We'll print the local IP address and so just print it. So we're gonna run the server. Okay, there it goes, and you can see the address right here: 192.168.113. And then if I go to IP config, I'm an idiot. Let's run cmd and move to IP config. Okay, there we go. So you have 192.168.1.3. There you go, baby. 192.168.1.3. Beautiful. All right, so that got our local machine's IPv4 address. So it looks like this is indeed a. So we'll say below function created 1725. Made this since Claude minded me the older method using socket get host name socket dot get fqdn get fqdn was unreliable. It is a more reliable function that retrieves local machines IP address. Used to assign dot server below. And this is hurt. I don't know why, but today it's just hurting my ears for some reason. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Now we have that function created and everything works. Cool. Now we can remove this print. And I'm going to go ahead and take my little break because we did hit our 68 minutes. So we're at 1 hour 14 minutes. We're going to go. My eyes are so red. It's not from like weed. I don't smoke weed or anything. I just am tired. You can like see it in my eyeballs. Probably got something to do with the cold as well. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna go take my little break, and I'm gonna take. I actually set my timer to say 8 minutes. Yeah, so I'm gonna take a little 8-minute break, and I'll be back, guys. All right. Well, I'll set it to 10 because I'll probably be a little late, and then like I'll know how late I am relative to the 8-minute mark. This. Now you see me, now you don't, babe. You guys get to look at sunset. I'm back. Let's do this. All right. Let's reset our timer. Renable my camera. Alright. So we're gonna do another hour. 68 minutes really. A little bit extra. You know, those extra 8 minutes add up, makes it to where I'm not really taking a break every hour. By like the second or third hour it ends up being, you know, like an hour and 20 minutes or 24 minutes, so it's, you know, improves my productivity a little bit and still kind of makes me feel like I'm getting a break every hour, you know what I'm saying? Alright, so where exactly do we leave off? We did things to do. So that's right. We added this get local machine IP which is a mouthful for a function, but I like my names to be very descriptive, and I don't really care like how long they are. I much prefer descriptiveness over brevity. Alright, so alright, we were going through, we just kind of like going through this and getting like a little sidetracked, hopefully in productive ways. Yeah, so ultimately, yeah, we were actually, what were we looking at connect for? We were looking at connect to see exactly what goes on here. Connect self, network socket, connect self adder, return self network socket. What exactly, like, there was a reason why I went over here to look at this. Was it to determine how we would figure out if we were reconnecting? Well, I'm not gonna rack my brain too hard over it if I can't just remember. It's not like entirely so important. So yeah, we have if name is equal to main while true, then it's gonna do the menu screen. And then if reconnect is equal to true, then we would get the checkpoint ID. Now this is opting for the checkpoint system. And how would we determine if reconnect was true? Well, that would be determined by receiving the game ID, right? We would receive the game ID, and then we would check to see if it matched the saved game ID. So, really, all we would have to check to determine if we were reconnecting would be to check the game ID, right? It's that simple. We would check the saved file's game ID. If our local save file game ID was not none, then we know it's a reconnect. Right. So if reconnect is equal to true slash if local save files game ID is equal to none. If game ID if this means we never started a game, received a game ID from SS. There, bam. So that's easy. Easy way to determine if reconnect is equal to true. There we go. Okay, so that's good. We're getting there. We're getting there, baby. And if we use, so yeah, we go to menu screen, and then so basically we would choose from the menu screen to start a new game. Whoops, why did that do that? Say option start new game, and then other option would be continue started game. This is reconnect, and this is non-reconnect. So then if we chose this option, it would then check to see if the local, and then this one is dot dot dot. So we make new connection, like new connection, make new connection to what? What? How? And then option continue started game, we would reconnect, and to determine this, we would have if local save files game ID is equal to none. But that has to happen. You see what I'm saying here? There's a little bit of a chicken and the egg problem about what happens first. I want to make sure I get this right here. When we have the menu screen, we have the start new game option or the reconnect option. But this, okay, right, because it's locally saved already. If we have the local save files game ID not equal to none, then this option will be available. So if save file game ID is not equal to none, this means you never started. Then we can choose to reconnect to previously started game. Right? And then obviously when we do that, so if the local save files game ID is not equal to none, then we have the option to do that, and then Yeah, so that's basically like the inverse of, you know, now we solve the chicken and the egg problem. Now this is the chicken, and then that is the egg. So we first check the game ID. If it's not equal to none, then we enable option, and then we'll say else. We'll just say elif list local save files game ID is equal to none. We can choose can't choose to reconnect to previously start again. We would have disable option. Okay. True. All right. So then if it's a reconnect, we would then do the get checkpoint ID. So then if we choose, or whatever the fuck that was supposed to be, choose reconnect, then we would get the checkpoint ID. And this is if use checkpoint system. Man, I gotta get better at typing. Fuck, dude. It's terrible. Like, just, ugh. Man. Fingers all over the place, dog. Spaghetti hands over here. Do I have fingers or fucking noodles? Like, what's going on? Choose reconnect, use checkpoint system. Then we would do Y. Okay. So this is getting more fleshed out here. I'm going in the order of like what actually has to happen, as opposed to pie in the sky, just kind of like brainstorming. You know what I mean? Like I started brainstorming, and then I was like, well, you know, it's kind of better. Sometimes it's to live in fantasy land and just brainstorm, and then other times it's a better idea to come back down to earth and literally look in the file and like, okay, go line by line. What's gonna happen first, second, third, and fourth? And the first thing that would have to happen is the main menu screen, the option to start a new game or to reconnect, etc., etc. So yeah, if the local save files game ID is not equal to none, then we can choose to reconnect to start a game. In that case, the option to continue to start a game would be enabled. Then if we chose to reconnect, then we would well, if we're using the checkpoint system, we would get the checkpoint ID to determine which point we're going to check back in at. Now, the issue with the previous supposition for that system was that assumed a structure such as this. We had if reconnect is equal to false, or checkpoint in is equal to 1, so on and so forth. I don't even like that per se. But basically, if we did the checkpoint system, we would have to put each section in a function and enter into whatever checkpoint using the checkpoint integer, and have the associated function or the game section be called within that if statement. So we have if reconnect is equal to false, or checkpoint end is equal to 1. Um, and we're not going to need this reconnect is equal to false because we're going to have those already like distinguished. So if you're in a section, you're not going to have connect equal to false. It would you connecting in this instance. So we're actually going to move this, and we're just going to put for now dot dot dot. So we have surly dot dot dot. Okay, so if we chose reconnect, we use checkpoint system, we'd get checkpoint ID. And where would we get that from? That would be from save file, right? And we do have that already implemented, the variable, but we might not use it if we go with the state system instead. And then we would run this checkpoint specific code to load in proper data. This would be called the pre-checkpoint function, and then we would then we have this code that we copied. Basically, that's what we would do. Then we would run if elif section to determine which game section function to run. We'll say each game section associated with each checkpoint int, right? So on and so forth, and that would look like, we'll say, example code. It would look like this. Go to 1, run, let's just say game section func, and so on and so forth. Game section 2 func, and game section 20 function, so on and so forth. So like this basically, and I mean, this is fine. This is a way to do it. It does require, if we use the checkpoint system, it would require us to convert all of the existing code into smaller functions. And we would have to retest all that. But if we used the well, no, I think we might still have to do that regardless, because even if we did the state system where, you know, instead of going off of the having an integer as a checkpoint, we would basically just be going off of a game state existing as a string. So it would be like the filter section, whatever, receive filter, dictionary filter section, receive part 1 or receive part 2, etc., etc. We would basically divide it into sections and identify them using strings that were descriptive versus using just integers that were not necessarily descriptive. Self-explanatory rather, but we would still either way have to have the I was gonna say we would have to change all these different sections into functions to enter back into a particular section. But we could have code built in to the main section that instead, like, we would just leave the main while loop as it is, and instead just have a set of code that's run one time prior to the standard entry into the main while loop. That would basically handle restoring the game to its previous state. So without like jumping back into a certain section and keeping track of that, we would just have an overall set of like rules that, you know, were followed upon a reconnect, where but I don't think that would work. It sounds nice, but in reality, like how do you even know, you know, like there's like this line right here, like if we disconnected this line, or if we disconnected this line, you know, how do you know what lines need to be rerun? Because obviously if we disconnected here but didn't run this line, we couldn't run these lines. It wouldn't work. Or it would work incorrectly. So I'm just not sure if that would be possible. I don't think it would. Zero client ID equals get client ID con current client equals client. You know, we have all these little sections. Yeah, I basically feel like we pretty much would have to use some sort of checkpoint system. I just don't see us being able to do it without some sort of checkpoint system. Now what I can do is I can actually copy this entire file, and I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to tell me what, or Claude rather, what I could do to offer a solution. So I'm gonna copy this, and I just want to see what is Claude gonna do. So let's see what we pasted in, and the indentation is not correct. The filter function. Function. There, it doesn't really matter. Let's see. Based for the code I pasted, could you provide a system for allowing us to re-enter certain of this main while loop on the place we disconnected at. So we pick up left off some form of checkpoint system or state management system or something like that, which doesn't require too much refactoring. Let's see what Claude will give us. Okay, it says let's implement a checkpoint system using integer flags. This requires minimal refactoring and allows recovery from different points in the loop. So the system tracks execution point via checkpoint int, saves state on disconnect, restores state and skips already completed sections on reconnect. Requires only adding checkpoint flags and if statements, maintains existing logic flow, insert checkpoint flags before critical sections and wrap those sections in checkpoint conditionals. On reconnect, it will skip section before the disconnection point. So we have, let's open this up and look at this a little more. So checkpoint system implementation, class, checkpoint system, init self checkpoint int 0, reconnect equals false. So it tracks the current execution point that we have, indicates if we're in reconnection mode. Save state, save critical state when disconnection occurs. State, save data, change attribute list, receive time, checkpoint int. Yeah, but that's not quite enough. There's gonna have to be more. Like, they're gonna have to be more. You know what I mean? Just believe this. Restore state, restore. See, so last day, receive data. Da 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 da. Okay. I mean, this is what we would want to do, something like this. Basically, this is essentially the right track. But as far as like this code itself actually working is this is very like simple, rudimentary of what I would need. I have the checkpoint equals checkpoint system. Then we have while true checkpoint is 9. So they start at 9, checkpoint int is equal to 9 or not, checkpoint reconnect. You do ready. Checkpoint is 9. Ready. Checkpoint int is 8. Okay. So let's suppose that let's suppose that it DC'd like right after this, if ready. So let's just say we're running the loop. Our checkpoint is 9. Checkpoint reconnect is not true. So then we run ready. All right. Then we get if ready, and then we DC. Okay. Let's say we DC at this point, or right after our checkpoint is set to 10. Now, then when we reconnect, it's gonna skip this section here, and then this will work because this is at the highest indent level. So then it would have ready. Ready would be assigned. Well, I mean, we would have to run a function to reload that in from the save file, but like that's all fine and dandy. Okay, so let's just assume that happens. Then we would enter into this checkpoint int would be 10. Checkpoint is equal to 10. Then it's gonna run this code. Okay, but what if it disconnected like right here? Well, I mean, that's the whole point of the checkpoint. Like, we would go back to just rerun the first 2 lines again. It's fine that those 2 got ran and properly assigned and then it DC'd. We don't have to worry about recovering it. That's the whole point of having smart checkpoints, so that we can, you know, just rerun certain code. But, well, not necessarily though, like, because the receive is not gonna happen again. You're not gonna reconnect and re-receive it. If it's already been received, then it's not gonna exist in the receive buffer or whatever anymore. So like, we actually would have to recover this data first, or we, you know, continued. And in this case, we wouldn't want to run this line, because if we ran that line, it would reassign current client receive data to end receive, which, let's just say at this point there is none. So at this point now this would errantly equal none. You know what I'm saying? So like, it has to be very smart. The way that we do this has to be smart. And then sender ID, so on and so forth. Like, this is really important. We can deduce the sender ID, the send ID, and the core data from that received data. So the checkpoint, the next checkpoint really should start after this. You see what I'm saying? But like, how do you know whether this line had been run? Well, you would have to use a line tracker. See, it's complicated. There's really no easy way out here. But this system overall is basically what I had thought of if we were going to use the checkpoint system. This general system, although the way that this one exists is pretty flawed. Just like based off of looking at this, that's already no bueno as far as I can tell. See, then we hit checkpoint int 11, but you wouldn't re-enter into ready. You wouldn't re-enter into this section because, let's just say, like, you already extracted from ready, so it's not ready anymore. You're supposed to jump back in, let's just say right here. Well, you wouldn't even be able to, because if ready would be false, so that whole loop would be fucked up. You see what I'm saying? It wouldn't work right. So yeah, it's kind of bad code, actually. This is not great. This Claude it's not as impressive as I thought it would have been. Honestly, I thought it would have done a little better than this, personally, from what I had heard from my previous experience with AI. I'm probably not prompting it correctly enough. That's what I've heard people say. You have to be good at prompting to get the proper response. It's really more of a skill issue, versus it's not that the AI can't do the work, it's that you don't know how to get the AI. You don't know how to get the AI to spit out the right words. So your prompt. But yeah, this would just not work. This is not good. Checkpoint reconnect. Yeah, this is just That was terrible, honestly, Claude. Not good. Um, so yeah, as far as, and I know we're going back over this ground again and again, but this is, this is how it is. I don't think there's a way to avoid a line, not necessarily a line by line, but a very fine-tuned line tracking slash checkpoint system that's integrated with a constant save system that's going to allow us to pick up where we left off. And I do believe that we are going to have to refactor this entire file here, basically, like these 300 something lines, to basically create little functions that can be called from the highest level, indent level, based on our checkpoint int, etc. So this is gonna have to be a big refactor. We're gonna have to turn all this into littler functions, and it's gonna require a lot of intelligence. It's not, there's not some magical set of code that I could implement, at least that I can't think of. That was what I was trying to do. I'm trying to avoid the refactor and just create some preliminary code that gets run one time per reconnect that basically just gets everything back in order, before we were to re-enter into the main loop. And I mean, that might be possible. It might be, we might be able to figure that out. It wouldn't be easy though. Like, but I think I'm gonna take a little break. I'm just really kind of tired right now. I'm gonna take a break and I'm gonna probably go to the gym. I'm gonna eat and I'm gonna come back and try to work on this a little more. But I'm not feeling very productive at the moment. So yeah, I'm gonna take a break and we'll come back.